I would be classified as a systems artist, which is I'm particularly interested in processes, natural and human-made systems, processes of patterns of organisation and so on. And my artwork is typically quite abstract in that I decided about almost 10 years ago to move away from the video work I was doing and the work that I was doing that was very literal and literally looking at systems. So I might include video footage of ecosystems or human movement and so on. And I've moved towards creating much more sort of abstract images. So, for example, a typical image of mine. It's a little slow. Might be. Might be something along the lines of a piece that was in this exhibition called Resonance. That was a collaboration between myself and Esther Warrenson, who's who does public art and sculptural forms, was in this exhibition here last year, but we had an exhibition together. If I can get a picture up, it's actually a little slow. A typical image of mine would be something along the lines of these. Yeah, I will. I feel like I'm building it up too much actually now. Okay, so we've got it. So, I'm interested in permutations, combinations, dynamic processes, and these are what you might call stills from a generative piece of work, which is actually made up of a 3x3 grid, so 9 pieces which are in turn composed of a 5x5 grid, and those patterns are swapping colours with each other and organising themselves, and it makes for quite an interesting algorithmic generative piece, and in this case I've taken stills. So that's what my work would typically look like. I might either produce prints or run the work on screens. But I've also had a long time interest in lasers, partly because I used to go to festivals and events and so on, and I used to do sort of laser VJing and laser work there. But also there's a very different quality to the light coming from a laser to a typical screen-based piece. So the piece here, which is the laser piece, is the first time that I've exhibited something using some new technology that I've managed to get hold of, which involves the ability to program the laser live. So when I've done work in the past, it's often been pre-generated, almost like showing a video, but showing a laser sequence. Whereas the piece here actually is generated live and potentially could respond to other things happening in the space. So my screen-based, is a print-based, my screen-based work often respond to each other, to sounds, to light and so on. And I can now introduce that way of working to the laser piece. The laser piece is also using colours from a sort of sequence that I generated towards the end of last year, which was an attempt really for me to engage with the process of colour selecting in a more systemic way. And prior to that, the colours here are really based on my personal colour preferences. I use colours that I like the look of. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but I wanted to go back and sort of say, well, where do my colours come from? Part of it is from me, part of it I'd like to be from the viewer. They can choose colours, but part of it is from this system I've created. And it's a palette of 4,096 colours. And the idea is to introduce those colours into generative work running on the laser. And so what I could very briefly show is how that works, and then I will hand over to someone else. So I have...
That hissing noise, Nicola just pressed the smoke machine, which usually lights up the laser beams. It's because you're so hot.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit, but...
up to the ceiling, so it's not getting as far as this.
You can see a bit of it now. You can see a bit of it now.
And is that surface on the wall important?
Sorry?
Is that surface that it's there on?
Well, this is the interesting thing about this exhibition, actually, which is I've worked with Genetic Move for a number of years, and the idea of our artworks interfering with each other or adding to each other has been quite important. The same happened last year, I think, with the exhibition that was here. And this is a fortuitous couple of connections in that my work is the laser. I like to see the beams, so you've got these intersecting planes, but also it's interesting to put it over things.
Yes,
So
that's
the piece
Albert
here,
Eppinghoff there. Sorry.
yeah. So the piece here, I really like how it's interacting, and I really like how it's interacting with this piece. Is the artist responsible for this piece?
She's not, unfortunately. So that's
Okay.
Albert Eppinghoff, who's the sculptor. Carol Viss is here, and that's her
Yeah.
piece hanging in the middle.
And actually, one thing I would say about this sort of exhibition is it's giving me ideas for how I want to be using. Like I say, laser light is very different to projected flat light, and so I don't want to create raves as such. I don't want it to be seen ravey, and people say, "Oh, I used to love visuals like that when I went to raves." I want it to be about the colour systems and the transformations of the colour palettes, and so maybe combining it with objects like this is a way of doing that. Gives it a different aesthetic feel. Very briefly then, so this is my initial exploration of my colour palette. So I have this sequence, and then as you interact with it, you get these little falls of colours, and these are the elements that I'll be creating my next wave of generative artworks with. And the idea with the laser piece here, which is based around 4 lines, is that it will be using the 4s of these as well. So it will jump around this sort of palette, or crawl around this palette, producing colours from the sequence. So if I was involved in next year's exhibition, I would hope to have developed this laser thing further, but also develop the ability maybe to interact with it. So if you have this running on your phone, it's designed for, and you click this button here, you would then introduce that colour palette into the laser projection, so there'd be a degree of interactivity. So that's like maybe a little bit of background on the work that I'm doing. Like I say, it's the start of a process, not the end of something, but it does tie into a much bigger sort of project of mine, which is to explore these permutations and colours and so on. So unless there are any questions, what I'd like to do now is probably show you a video. Are there any particular questions?